The conference room on the 38th floor was made entirely of glass walls, doors, even a narrow pane along the floor that revealed the lobby below like a nerve exposed. From this height, the city looked clean, orderly, predictable. But Clara Monroe, CEO of Aurelia Dynamics, had long known the view was a lie. "Begin the simulation," said CFO Damon Rhee, voice steady but eyes tight. The screen lit up Aurelia's new Pride AI Care Lift, a flagship algorithm designed to personalize financial options for patients navigating healthcare costs. In theory, it was elegant. In practice, it had never been tested this close to a public offering. On the wall-sized monitor, a fictional user profile loaded. Name, Angela M., 54. History, recently unemployed, diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer, income $0, insurance lapsed, the AI paused, calculating, then it suggested CareBoost Platinum credit line, $18,000 APR, 29.9%. Damon paled, "No," Clara said sharply, standing. "Pause the demo." Too late. The image had already burned itself into the retinas of everyone seated around the glass table. C-levels, lead engineers, investors dialed in silently on the far wall. A beat of silence. Then, from the far corner of the room, a slow squeak of a mop. Evan Cole, janitor, moved carefully over the glass floor's edge, knees slightly bent, mop in hand, uniform faded but clean. He hadn't looked up once. But now, without glancing away from the glass, he said, voice low but clear, "Your dataset's not biased, but your weightings are." The words cut like a thread snapping in a tensioned web. Everyone turned. Daniel Cross, the COO, gave a sharp exhale, half laugh, half scoff. "Oh, terrific. We've got janitorial peer review now." A few nervous chuckles followed. Clara didn't laugh. She looked up slowly. Evan continued, not defensive, just honest. "You trained the model with a scarcity framing. Desperation gets higher engagement, sure. But you didn't pin ethical thresholds. The optimizer's doing exactly what it was told to." "You saying our engineers are sloppy?" Daniel shot back. "No," Evan said simply. "I'm saying the incentives are." Another silence. Clara's gaze narrowed, not hostile but alert. Something in his cadence, the way he separated logic from blame. She'd heard that tone before, 17 years ago. A high school classroom, a broken girl, a rusted science fair model, and a young teacher who refused to give up on either. One day, you'll build what people say can't be built. The memory vanished as quickly as it came. Clara looked down at her tablet. She tapped 3 words, pause, roll out immediately. Then looked up. "Aisha," she said, addressing the woman seated beside her. "Can you confirm our ethics gating parameters? I want a full review by end of week." Aisha Patel, General Counsel, gave a sharp nod. "We'll begin today." Daniel leaned back in his seat, jaw tight. "We're 2 weeks from IPO readiness. We don't have time to retrain an entire model." Clara didn't blink. Better late than subpoenaed. And with that, she turned to the investors on the call. "We'll reschedule the AI Care Lift preview until internal compliance completes a gating audit. We appreciate your patience." The screen dimmed. The moment passed. But Clara's hand stayed still, fingers resting lightly on the screen of her tablet. The name, Evan Cole, glowed, faintly drawn from the building's internal schedule log. Just below it, another notification buzzed to life. Internal IPO readiness call, moved up, new time. Friday, 8:01 a.m. She exhaled quietly. Stakes had just doubled, and the only person who saw the crack in the glass was the man cleaning it. The building emptied one light at a time. Most people never saw Aurelia Dynamics after dark, when the polished glass turned to mirrors and the hum of machines replaced conversation. But for Evan Cole, this was when the world made sense. Quiet, predictable, honest. He swiped his badge at the janitorial clock-in terminal, a soft beep, a green flash. 10 p.m. sharp. He switched out his scuffed work shoes for another pair even older soles held together with black tape. His left index finger had split from the dry winter air. He wrapped it carefully in a strip of cloth before reaching for the mop bucket. Marilyn Vega, his co-worker, rolled her cart past with a tired grin. She'd been with the cleaning staff 15 years longer than him, and she noticed everything. "Hey, Professor," she teased, pulling a bandage from her pocket. "You're leaking again." Evan smiled faintly. "Appreciate it. Don't mention it." She peeled the bandage, pressed it into his hand. "That demo upstairs today heard you scared the suits." He paused, eyes lowering. "I didn't scare them, just said what was true." "That's what scares them," she said, pushing her cart away. He laughed under his breath and went back to work. The glass floor gleamed where the mop passed. Reflections bent and reformed the faces of people who'd never looked down long enough to see themselves there. By 11:40 p.m., Evan was home in Brooklyn, a third-floor walk-up that smelled faintly of dust and lemon detergent. He hung his jacket on the chair, set his lunchbox on the counter, and turned the kitchen faucet. A slow drip, then another. He twisted the handle, the leak got worse. "Figures," he murmured, reaching for a wrench that didn't fit anymore. A letter lay open on the counter, notice of rent due, second reminder. He folded it neatly, set it beneath a coaster. The habit of a man who couldn't stand disorder even when his life was full of cracks. From the small bedroom, a faint sound, the breathing rhythm of a child asleep. He peeked in. Maddie slept curled around a cardboard wind turbine they'd built from an old fan. The blades spun slowly under the whisper of the radiator. Her backpack sat open beside the bed. Inside, tomorrow's lunchbox. A peanut butter sandwich, an apple, and a folded note in her rounded handwriting, "You fix what people think can't be fixed." He touched the note, the corner of his mouth lifting despite the weight pressing on him. Outside, sirens faded down Flatbush Avenue. The world kept moving. He sat at the kitchen table, opened his worn notebook, filled not with complaints but with sketches, airflow maps, wiring diagrams, a cost reduction layout for Aurelia's HVAC system. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He just liked making things better. He looked at the clock. Midnight. "Bedtime genius," he whispered to himself and turned off the light. Across the East River, the 38th floor of Aurelia was still lit. Clara Monroe sat alone, blazer off heels on the floor beside her chair. The city outside glowed with the artificial calm of success, endless glass towers pretending to be stars. On her screen, employee directory, maintenance division. She typed Evan Cole. A file appeared. Employee ID 0432, position custodial technician, night shift, start date 2019, supervisor facilities lead, M. Vega. She scrolled further down. Previous occupation technical education instructor, Brooklyn South High. Awards, New York State Teacher of the Year 2012. Reason for departure, family medical leave, spouse terminal illness. Clara's throat tightened. She clicked on a linked article, an archived news piece with a small photo, Evan Younger standing beside a student science project. Local teacher brings real-world engineering to the classroom. Her eyes drifted to the caption, "He teaches kids to build what they thought they couldn't." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she closed the tab. Emotional recognition was dangerous in her position. Every reaction could look like favoritism. Every impulse a liability. She turned to the window, her own reflection looking back at her tired, precise, slightly haunted. She opened her corporate planner and began typing a directive to HR. Subject, pilot, initiative, open floor, any role. Description, 10-minute micro-presentations open to all staff regardless of position to submit cost-saving or innovation proposals. Objective, encourage inclusivity and cross-functional dialogue. Launch date Wednesday. Azio p.m. Before sending, she copied in General Counsel Aisha Patel. Her message beneath the draft, "Please review for potential retaliation risk. We'll need clear guardrails for participants. Anonymous submission optional. No evaluation tied to performance reviews. Aisha replied within minutes, even at 12:22 a.m. Aisha, good move. I'll prepare compliance language and comms. Should we expect? Outside attention, Clara, eventually. But not yet. She hovered her fingers over the keyboard for a moment longer, then sent the message. Clara smiled faintly at the irony. She stood stretched and turned toward the darkened hallway. For a moment, she caught her reflection again this time, not in the window, but in the polished floor beneath her desk. And for a reason she couldn't name, she imagined the faint outline of a mop moving quietly across it. Back in Brooklyn, Evan stirred awake at the sound of the leaky faucet. He padded barefoot into the kitchen and grabbed a towel. The leak had slowed, not fixed, but steady enough to ignore. He looked at the lunchbox waiting by the door. He smiled, remembering Maddie's note. You fix what people think can't be fixed. He tucked it into his wallet next to a faded photo of his late wife. Her face caught mid-laughter sunlight in her hair. Still trying, he whispered. Then he sat by the window for a while, watching the lights of Manhattan blink in the distance, lights belonging to people who would never know his name. But somewhere among them, a woman who once did. The model kept collapsing. A tiny wind turbine barely taller than a coffee mug lay sideways on the desk. Its paper blades sagged to one side, no longer catching the air from the fan. 17-year-old Clara Monroe furrowed her brow, her hands streaked with dried glue and ink from a half-spilled pen. She exhaled sharply through her nose as if frustration alone could blow the thing upright. I followed the instructions, she muttered. Across the room, a younger Evan Cole, 21, sharp-featured and buzz-cut, fresh from a summer teaching program, leaned on the edge of a cluttered lab table, arms crossed. That's the problem, he said. You followed instructions. But wind doesn't care about instructions. It cares about balance, design, and patience. She shot him a glare. Easy for you to say. You didn't just pull a double shift at Charlie's Diner. I know you're tired. He walked over, crouched beside the model. But I've seen tired people do beautiful things. Especially you. Clara looked away. Her hands trembled as she adjusted the base again. Why does it matter? She whispered. It's just a stupid fair project. Evan didn't answer right away. Instead, he gently lifted one of the blades and rewound the wire coil at the center, careful, precise, as if it were fragile glass. Then he said, because when people tell you something can't be done, and you do it anyway, that moment, even if it's just a toy spinning in the wind, it makes you believe again. He stood, placed the model in front of the desk fan, and clicked it on. The blades fluttered, sputtered, then turned. Clara's eyes widened. Evan smiled, arms crossed. One day, you're going to build something people say can't be built. He started walking away, then stopped. Promise me, he said. Voice low, but steady. Don't let the world make you forget how to fix things. Clara looked at the turbine spinning fast now, catching every breeze. I promise, she said. That same Tuesday evening, just before sunset, Clara Monroe sat alone in her corner office high above Manhattan. The wind outside pressed softly against the glass, the faint rattle of air pressure reminding her just how thin the barrier was between her and the drop. She stared at the skyline, a forest of steel and glass towers that scraped the sky but never touched it. Her tablet sat dark on the desk, her phone face down, and yet the room felt noisy. Memory had its own volume. She whispered aloud, not realizing it, I forgot that promise for too long. No one answered, and still she sat in silence, a CEO with no audience, remembering the only moment anyone ever told her she might be something more than strategic. Then her intercom buzzed. It was Lila, her corporate secretary. Just a heads up, Aisha's review of the open floor protocol is finalized. We'll send internal comms tomorrow. Thank you, Clara said quietly. Send me the full compliance draft. She didn't ask about Evan. Didn't need to. She knew the real risk wasn't legal, it was emotional. And emotion in business was the enemy of clarity, or so she'd been told. She looked back out the window, a pane of glass that reflected only part of her face. The rest was shadow. Across the river in Brooklyn, just after 6, Evan was balancing a desk fan on the kitchen counter, while Maddie giggled as she held the plastic bottle steady. Evan grinned and lowered the desk fan closer. "Okay," he said. "If we set the blade angle just right, we should get lift. But it has to be consistent. No wobble." She raised an eyebrow. "Consistent like your weird peanut butter sandwich every day." He blinked. "Peanut butter is a classic. Don't question science." She laughed a full-body laugh, loose and free. The bottle turbine on the kitchen counter spun to life as the fan kicked on. Maddie's eyes lit up. "It's working." "Yep," Evan said, adjusting the angle slightly. "Because we didn't just copy instructions. We observed. We adapted." Maddie looked up at him. "You sound like a teacher." He paused, then sat beside her. "I used to be." "What happened?" He was quiet. Then life got messy. And sometimes when you're trying to hold everything together, teaching goes last. Maddie nodded like she understood, though she was only 9. She leaned her head against his arm. "You still teach me. Every day." Evan's throat tightened. He put an arm around her and let the moment breathe. Sometimes the world didn't need fixing. Sometimes it just needed seeing. Later that night, Aurelia, HQ 9:40 p.m. Clara stared at a new document on her screen. Internal pilot open floor, any role, submission program launch tomorrow at 4:20 p.m. She read it twice, then opened a private note. The man who said the dataset wasn't biased, his name is Evan Cole. She paused, fingers hovering, then deleted the sentence. She wasn't ready to make that connection official. Not yet. But the echo of his voice still lingered. Measured. Direct. The optimizer's doing exactly what it was told to. She stood and walked to the far side of her office where a framed schematic of Aurelia's first product hung on the wall, a routing system for hospital equipment, efficient but soulless. It had won awards, saved costs, landed headlines, but had it changed anything? Truly, she touched the glass. The surface was clean, but the reflection staring back felt incomplete. Hours later, under the hush of midnight, Evan sat alone at the kitchen table again, the apartment finally quiet. He opened Maddie's lunchbox, checking the lid to make sure it closed properly. Inside was a new note drawn in purple marker. "Science is how we make things better." He smiled and slipped the note into his wallet beside yesterday's. The pages of his old teaching notebook sat open beside him, sketches of energy models, wiring diagrams, forgotten plans. He stared at one drawing a small wind turbine like the one he helped a girl build a lifetime ago. A girl who had once promised not to forget how to fix things. Maybe. She hadn't. The sign outside the smaller conference suite on the 22nd floor read, "Open floor innovation from any role 3 minutes. One idea. Every voice." It sounded like a slogan, but inside the room things felt more real. Rows of chairs filled quickly with engineers, analysts, operations staff, even a couple of cafeteria team members in fresh aprons. No one wore nameplates. That was the rule. No titles, just voices. At the front, a simple podium. One mic. One digital timer glowing red 0300. To the side sat General Counsel Aisha Patel, arms folded, her expression unreadable. Next to her was Lila Torres' corporate secretary, clipboard in hand. Everything was being recorded, legally, transparently. Clara Monroe stood off to the side, leaning against the wall near a coffee station. She wasn't on the agenda. She was there to listen, watch, gauge, because this wasn't about hierarchy. It was about signal. And right now she needed to know who still cared about the foundation beneath the polish. The first few speakers were safe incremental efficiency proposals, minor bug fixes, one clever UI tweak that earned a polite round of applause. Then, next up, Evan Cole. Heads turned. From the back row, Evan stood. His navy blue custodial shirt was neatly pressed name stitched in cursive above his chest. He walked calmly to the podium, not nervous, just deliberate. He adjusted the mic slightly. "Good afternoon. No notes, just memory. I'm Evan, night shift custodian. Been with Aurelia 4 years." A few faces looked confused. One engineer in the second row raised an eyebrow. Evan continued, "I submitted a short memo about optimizing our HVAC energy load using low-cost sensors, mostly passive infrared and temperature variance points. I'd like to explain." He tapped the tablet at the podium, bringing up a schematic of the building's ventilation system. Simple overlays, color-coded, clean. "I noticed some zones cool unnecessarily after midnight. We're running peak cycle airflow to floors no one occupies. With $20 motion sensors and a basic logic chain, we could reduce runtime without interfering with server cooling or fire code compliance." He flipped to the next slide. A simple chart. Estimated savings $1.8 million annually. Silence. Not stunned. Processing. He nodded once. "That's it. Thank you." He stepped back. Aisha scribbled something on her notepad. Clara's eyes stayed locked on Evan, not impressed. Not yet. Just watching. From the far side of the room, Daniel Cross chuckled. The COO leaned forward in his chair, tone light but dripping with condescension. "So, we're now taking energy advice from the mop and bucket division." A few uncomfortable shifts in the room. Clara didn't move. Evan looked at him evenly. "I'm not here for credit, just for savings." Daniel smirked. "Let me guess, next week you'll have a plan for our IPO roadshow too." Before anyone could speak, CFO Damon Rhee raised a hand. "Actually," he said carefully, "I'd like facilities to bench test this. 48 hours. Compare energy draw with Evan's proposed offsets. Real data." Daniel turned to him. "You can't be serious." Damon shrugged. "If we can save $1.8 million, I'm very serious. That's runway." At the back, Ben Armitage, the CISO, chimed in. "Just to add, using isolated non-networked sensors means no increase in cyber risk. Low barrier, high yield. I like it." Clara saw it. The shift. Not in words, but in posture. The room wasn't laughing anymore. Daniel crossed his arms and muttered something inaudible. Clara opened her phone quietly, checking the internal dashboard she'd bookmarked earlier that week. One caught her eye. Ethics Monitoring Module. Carelift AI. Status gating. Override logged. Override initiated by COO account timestamp 07:16 a.m. Monday. She blinked. That was just minutes before the AI demo disaster. Her jaw tightened. On the dashboard, Ethics Gate overridden by Coco. She didn't react publicly. Just lock the screen. But in her mind, alarm bells were ringing. A few hours later, Clara was back in her office rewatching the open floor footage. She paused it at Evan's schematic. It wasn't just clever, it was elegant. Then she rewound again, listened to his tone, the rhythm. No ego, just clarity. She looked up his submission memo. It was 2 pages, clean, labeled, estimated timelines and equipment sourcing included. Not a janitor's guesswork, a technician's logic. She scrolled past it, back to the dashboard. The ethics override was real, and the signature was Daniel's, which meant this wasn't a fluke. It was a choice, and Evan hadn't just spotted a glitch. He'd triggered the fault line. That same evening in the maintenance locker room, Evan sat on a bench unlacing his boots as Marilyn stepped in, tossing her gloves into the laundry bin. "You made a few folks sweat today," she said, half smiling. "Didn't mean to. That's why it worked." She handed him a folded paper towel. Inside was a sticky bun from the cafeteria. Still warm. "You earned it." He nodded gratefully. "Thanks." Marilyn sat beside him, quiet for a moment. "You know," she said finally, "some of those people in that room, they've never been spoken to by someone without a title. Not really spoken to." Evan didn't answer, but in his chest something stirred. Not pride, responsibility. It was just after 9. In a private Slack channel, one seen only by Clara, Aisha, and the small compliance sub-team, a soft ping broke the silence. A new message glowed on the screen. Alert system, admin override, detected source, COO account, manual, input file, care, lift, staging, EU, model, weights.json, action. Unflagged aggressive credit tier for risk category 4. Clara stared at the message, the words sharp as glass. This wasn't about optics anymore. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a bug. This was a system being bent intentionally. And for the first time, someone had dared to speak the truth aloud, in a room that had been silent for far too long. The alert came through just as Evan was finishing his second-floor sweep. A message from the facilities app flashed on his custodial tablet. Notice immediate meeting required. Room 11C. HR representative present. No explanation. No context. He wiped his hands on a rag, dropped the mop back in the cart, and headed for the elevator. The hallway outside room 11C was quiet. Too quiet. Inside, 2 people were waiting. Julia from HR face neutral and rehearsed, and someone from facility security clipboard and hand badge half visible. Mr. Cole Julia said gently, "Please have a seat." Evan sat. She slid a document across the table. "We've received a report of possible equipment mishandling connected to your work area. We're required to launch a preliminary investigation, and during that time you'll be placed on temporary administrative leave with full pay. Standard protocol." He blinked. "I'm sorry." Mishandling of what Julia glanced briefly at the man beside her, then cleared her throat. "We found residue from industrial solvent inside a network closet adjacent to the Carelift staging server room. There's concern it may have contributed to hardware malfunction." Evan stared at her. "That closet is always locked. I've never cleaned in there. I don't even have the access code." "We understand," she replied, not unkindly. "But there's a potential chain of custody issue. Until we finish gathering facts, we have to limit access to high-impact areas." "You think I sabotaged something?" he asked, calm but incredulous. "We're not saying that," she said quickly. "We're just gathering data." He looked down at the paper. HR letterhead. Legal safe language. Subject temporary suspension. Pending internal review status paid. Non-punitive. Duration undetermined. "We'll notify you within 7 business days," she added. Evan didn't speak. He signed where indicated, stood, and walked out without another word. The air outside felt sharper than usual. 9:02 a.m. Clara's office. Clara read the HR update once, then again, her jaw clenched. She picked up the phone. "Aisha, I need you up here." Minutes later, Aisha Patel walked in with her laptop. "This smells like pretext," Clara said, pacing. "They're throwing janitorial staff under the bus for a server room incident." Aisha opened her screen. Daniel authorized a sweep of internal access logs 2 days ago. The incident report was conveniently vague. No timestamp, no actual damage logged. Then it's retaliation. "Not overt," Aisha said, nodding, "but convenient and dangerous, especially after open floor." Clara turned sharply. "What can we do?" Legal hold Aisha replied. "We issue one now. Freeze all logs, email, badge records, physical access controls. Lock the data trail. Do it," Clara said, "and get someone external to look at the metadata." "I already reached out to Fortis Forensics," Aisha added. "They're reputable, discreet, and independent." Clara exhaled. "Good." Then paused, and Evan Aisha raised an eyebrow. "What about him?" "I don't want him contacted directly by anyone on my team," Clara said firmly. "No favors, no friendly warnings. We follow process. If this comes back to us as meddling, it's ammunition for the wrong people." Aisha nodded. Smart move. Clara walked to the window, staring down at the avenue below. Cars, lives, distractions, everything moving blind to what mattered. A janitor speaks the truth. A system bites back. She whispered under her breath almost a prayer. Stay clean, Evan. I'll do the rest. 5:24 p.m. Brooklyn. Evan set the kettle down harder than necessary. It clanged against the stove. Maddie sat at the kitchen table, her backpack open markers scattered everywhere. Want to talk about it? She asked. He looked over. Who said there was anything to talk about? You're making angry tea, she said flatly. The louder the clatter, the more I know. He sighed and sat across from her. They sent me home, he said finally. Said there's an investigation. Her eyes widened. Because of that meeting, no. He paused. Yes. Maybe. I don't know. She fiddled with the corner of her notebook. Did you lie? No. Did you break something? No. Then why? He reached across the table and put his hand over hers. Because sometimes, he said softly when someone speaks the truth. The people who benefit from silence get nervous. She blinked. So, you got punished for being honest? He hesitated, then nodded. Yes. Her voice was small. That's not fair. No, he agreed. But fairness takes time, and people who do the right thing, they just have to be more patient than the people doing the wrong thing. She looked at him for a long moment, then reached into her backpack and pulled out a fresh sticky note. In purple ink, she wrote, Being brave isn't loud, it's quiet and stubborn. She handed it to him. He tucked it into his wallet behind the others. His eyes shimmered. Thank you, Maddie. Now go finish your angry tea, she said. 8:37 p.m. Fortis Forensics HQ. The report came in fast. Aisha opened the secure document eyes, scanning line by line. Preliminary findings. Fortis Forensics Subject Server Room Incident Ethics Gate Module. Our analysis confirms a manual log edit occurred in the admin chain for the AI Carelift staging environment. The entry was modified using elevated credentials not typically granted to facilities staff. Metadata confirms a privilege escalation event on Monday morning at 7:16 a.m. Origin user EOO Cross D Daniel Cross. Aisha's heart pounded. It wasn't just suspicion now. It was digital proof. She picked up her phone. Clara, we have a problem and a path forward. Evan checked the time again. 7:19 p.m. He wiped his hands on a dish towel that had seen better days. The banged-up kettle rattled softly on the stove, and the leaky faucet behind him tapped out its slow, irritating rhythm into the metal sink. He'd meant to fix that 2 weekends ago. But then came overtime. Maddie's school project, the open floor presentation, and then the fallout. He ran a hand through his hair and glanced around the room. The kitchen was clean but lived in. The kind of space where things had purpose, not polish. A faded photo of Maddie and her mom was tucked into the fridge magnet corner. A small stack of sticky notes, each one a different encouragement from Maddie, sat in a jar next to the sugar bowl. Knock, knock, right on time. Evan walked to the door, opened it carefully. Clara Monroe stood on the threshold, flanked by Lila Torres Aurelia's corporate secretary, who carried a slim legal folder and an air of practiced neutrality. Evening, Clara said quietly. Evan nodded once. Come in. Lila stepped inside first, briefly scanned the room with the eyes of someone who knew what audit trails looked like in both data and body language. She took a seat in the living room within earshot, but not in the way. Clara followed her tailored black coat, somehow both elegant and understated. She looked at the worn floor tiles, the water stain near the stove, and then the modest wooden table where Evan motioned for her to sit. She took a breath. Thanks for making time. Evan folded his arms. Hard to turn down a CEO invite, especially when you bring your own witness. Clara smiled faintly. Standard protocol. Protects both of us. He nodded. I respect that. She looked around. This kitchen. It reminds me of where I grew up. Cheap linoleum chipped mugs, one window that never fully shut. Evan raised an eyebrow. I wasn't always... This Clara said, gesturing to her outfit, her posture, the quiet power she carried like a second skin. There was a time when I didn't have lunch money, when my mother worked nights and cried quietly over eviction letters. Evan said nothing, letting her speak. There was a science fair, she continued. 17 years ago. My project was collapsing, literally, and I was about ready to quit. She looked up, eyes steady. But there was this young teacher barely older than us. He stayed after hours, helped me rebuild, and when the turbine spun, he said something I never forgot. Evan blinked slowly. He remembered. One day, you'll build something people think can't be built. She gave the smallest nod. That voice was yours. Silence filled the kitchen. Only the leaky faucet broke it. Evan leaned back, eyes narrowing slightly. Why now? Clara folded her hands. Because that same voice just told a truth that made people uncomfortable. And now it's being punished. You think I need defending? No, she said softly. I think the system does. She pulled a folder from her bag and set it on the table. I've already initiated a legal hold. General Counsel is coordinating with Fortis Forensics. We're not burying this. Evan's gaze didn't move from her. Then what do you need from me? Clara met his eyes. I need you to show us where the rot is, but not touch it. No more demos, no documents. Just guide our eyes. The rest we do by the book. Evan sat back, arms crossed. Why should I trust you? She didn't flinch. Because I'm not asking you to save the company. I'm asking you to help save the people in it who still believe in integrity. People like Maddie. His jaw tensed at the mention of his daughter, but he said nothing. I won't let you be the scapegoat, she added, but I also can't promise the board won't fight back. The cleaner the truth, the harder it hits. Evan was quiet. Then, finally, he nodded. I won't touch the system, he said, but I'll show you where it's cracked. Clara let out a long breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Thank you, she said. He stood, walked to the counter, poured 2 mugs of hot water from the kettle. One for her, one for himself. No tea bags, just warmth. She took the cup hands curling around the ceramic, and for a moment they weren't CEO and janitor. Just 2 people sitting across a kitchen table remembering who they used to be and deciding what they were willing to become. The door to conference room 14B stayed closed for most of the week. No nameplate, no public calendar entry. Inside, there was no catering, no slide decks, no applause. Just truth hunted one bite at a time. This was the ghost team. Clara had named it in jest. Aisha hadn't laughed, but she hadn't disagreed. Because it was accurate, this was a group meant to see without being seen to clean, without leaving fingerprints. The members were handpicked quiet and deeply trusted. Aisha Patel, General Counsel, coordinated everything. She sat at the head of the long, narrow table laptop, open, red pen in hand. Her eyes missed nothing. Ben Armitage, the CISO, had sealed off the staging environment with military precision. He logged every request, isolated every subsystem, and kept Fortis Forensics fully sandboxed. Lila, Torres, the corporate secretary, typed minutes in real-time, logging each legal step with meticulous neutrality, because if this ever reached litigation or regulators, the paper trail would speak louder than any person. Robert Kim, audit chair and former federal compliance officer, reviewed every file, every clause, every finding. He spoke sparingly. When he did, people listened. And then there was Evan. Not a formal member, not an employee on record this week, but he sat in the corner seat, hands folded, speaking only when spoken to until it mattered. Tuesday, 10th, 22 a.m. Aisha tapped her pen against a printed spreadsheet. We need to trace the earliest point of deviation in the model's recommendation logic. Ben nodded. Fortis is already combing the weight files, but we need human logic. What would someone adjust to drive these outputs intentionally? All eyes turned to Evan. He stood, slowly moved to the whiteboard, picked up a marker. You'd start here, he said, drawing a simple triangle. Data intake. Most systems normalize inputs before analysis. If someone wanted to shift outcomes without triggering alerts, they'd go for feature weighting. Tell the model that certain risk signals are more predictive than others. Not wrong, just skewed. He added lines, boxes, loops. Then override the threshold tolerance. Instead of flagging borderline cases for manual review, you let them auto-approve. It's faster, looks efficient, and on paper still defensible. Until someone gets a predatory loan suggestion, Aisha said. Evan nodded. Exactly. Ben stepped forward. Could that be done without production access? Yes, Evan replied. If you tweak staging weights and someone deploys without reviewing deltas, it slides in. Looks like optimization. Robert Kim looked up from his notes. You're suggesting intent. I'm saying you don't get this outcome by accident, Evan replied. Wednesday, 4th, 47 p.m. Fortis delivered the first breakthrough. Jenna, the lead digital forensic analyst, stood in front of the room. Sharp, direct. We pulled physical badge data for the staging server room cross-referenced with camera footage. No janitorial entry after 8:00 p.m. the night before the override. No cleaners logged access at all. Lila tapped the record. So the solvent contamination Daniel flagged was either planted or coincidental, Jenna said, but not linked to Evan or any facilities staff. Ben nodded, arms crossed. Which matches what I expected. The log event was triggered using a service account admin level but not assigned to a person. Temporary. Auto-deletes after 72 hours unless extended manually. Aisha's eyes narrowed. That's against IT policy. Yes, Ben confirmed, and the account was extended twice. Jenna clicked to the next frame. A still image. Tuesday, 11th, 16 p.m. Daniel Cross. He exited the staging lab alone. No escort. No project team logged in. Security camera shows him swiping a secondary keycard, one only issued to executive IT sponsors. Silence. Then Robert Kim, calm but deadly. That's unauthorized system access. If proven intentional, it becomes governance fraud. Aisha nodded. We'll need to alert outside counsel. And the board, Lila added. Clara, who had stood silent for most of the meeting, finally spoke. We're not there yet. This is still internal. But yes, we move carefully legally, and we move fast. Thursday, 6th, 30 p.m. Maintenance break room. Evan sat across from Marilyn, his shift tag still in his pocket. He wasn't on the clock. He was here for something else. Marilyn poured 2 paper cups of vending machine coffee. You're in something, aren't you? She asked softly. You look like you're carrying someone else's secrets. Evan didn't answer, but she continued anyway. I didn't say anything before. But 2 weeks ago, I was called in late. Like real late. Got a text from Daniel's assistant saying to delay floor cleaning on 22 and 23 until after midnight. Evan looked up. Why? She shrugged, said some execs were pulling an all-nighter, told me to reroute staff. Anyone log that? No. They wanted it off the books. Thought it was weird, but didn't think much at the time. Evan took a deep breath. Can you write that down? She gave him a long look, then reached for a napkin and a pen. Thursday 9th, 12 p.m. Aurelia internal Slack. A notification leaked, not to the public, not even to the full company, just to the internal governance thread. Subject, special board session. Audit matters date. Saturday, 9:00 a.m. location boardroom. 38th floor attendance mandatory. Audit committee. Plah. Outside counsel. Daniel Cross saw it from his phone in the back of a rideshare. His grip tightened. He reread the subject line. Once, twice, 3 times. No details, no names. Just those words, audit matters. His mouth went dry. He opened his contact list, found the number labeled K. Chen, Priority Capital, and hovered, but didn't dial. Not yet. He looked out the window as the city blurred by. For the first time in years, Daniel Cross felt something he hadn't let in before. Fear. The sky over Manhattan darkened early that evening, thunderclouds hovering low as if they knew something the city didn't. Inside Aurelia's glass tower, the air was thick not with rain, but with pressure. Down in a discreet private lounge tucked behind the 36th floor boardroom, Daniel Cross poured 2 glasses of Barolo. He handed one to Director Miles Lang, a venture partner from Catalyst Equity. The votes, not tomorrow, Miles said. It's just an audit discussion. Daniel smiled without warmth. Which is why we need to act tonight. Across from them sat Dana Belcourt, another board member, deep-pocketed, pragmatic, and always alert to reputational risk. You really think Clara's the problem? She asked. I think Clara's a liability, Daniel replied smoothly. She paused rollout on our highest margin product 1 week before IPO review undermined investor confidence, and now she's got a janitor giving tech talks while compliance bleeds money on forensics. Dana swirled her glass. You want her to take a leave. A temporary one, Daniel said. Just long enough for us to get the ship steady. The optics are simple. She's too close to the investigation. Conflict of interest. She'll understand. Miles raised an eyebrow. And if she doesn't, Daniel's smile thinned. Then we explain how hostile her position has become to shareholders. The thunder outside cracked like punctuation. Eater 7, nar 12, p.m., Aisha Patel's office. The moment Claire read the memo Daniel had circulated to select board members, her hands clenched the edge of the table. It was subtle, technically polished, and layered in language like to preserve fiduciary alignment. In light of current volatility, a cooling-off period may restore confidence. He's trying to sideline me before I can present findings, she said, almost to herself. Aisha nodded grimly. It's a strategic play, but we're prepared. She slid a printed memo across the table. Subject CEO Action Review. Compliance context to audit chair. Corporate secretary, independent counsel. It outlined the steps Clara had taken, pausing the Carelift rollout due to a flagged ethics override, commissioning Fortis as an external auditor, refraining from direct contact with involved employees, and full legal compliance throughout. No retaliation. No evidence tampering. Everything clean, Aisha said. You've done your job, Clara. By the book. And yet they want me to look like the liability, Clara whispered. Aisha didn't say yes. She didn't have to. 7:58 p.m., Brooklyn. The sky had turned violet black as Evan jogged up the steps of Maddie's elementary school. His phone buzzed again, voicemail from HR. But his focus was on the gate. Maddie stood alone, hugging her lunchbox, trying to balance a math worksheet on top. All the other kids had gone. He stopped short, guilt hitting like a punch. Hey, Peanut, he said gently. She didn't cry, didn't complain. She just looked up and said, You're late. I know, he breathed, crouching down. I'm sorry. HR wanted to talk again. Maddie looked down at her lunchbox, then held it up. I left you a note. He opened the lid. A folded slip of paper, purple ink in her familiar blocky handwriting. You fix people, too. His breath caught. You think so? She nodded, serious. You helped Miss Rena last week when her cart broke. You fix things. But you also fix how people feel. That's harder. He hugged her tightly, fighting back emotion. Let's go home, he whispered. 8:23 p.m., Fortis Secure Lab. Jenna from Fortis stared at the monitor as her team parsed metadata from the staging server backups. Got something she said aloud. Draft folder. On screen appeared a saved unsent email buried in a cache never formally sent but recoverable. To vendor.support@optimaxdata.com. From dcross@aureliadin.com. Subject model alignment request need Carelift to recommend more assertively on Tier 4 profiles. IPO window won't last forever. Let's push risk appetite with intolerance, no red flags. No direct order. No line saying bypass ethics gate. But the intent unmistakable. Jenna flagged the file. Metadata shows it was written 90 minutes before the override occurred. She tapped into her secure terminal and began the upload to the audit package. Yorda 9, Suarid PM, Daniel's penthouse. He stood at the window watching the storm reflect off neighboring towers, a half-empty glass of wine in his hand. His phone buzzed. A message from his assistant Fortis report finalized. Will be delivered to audit chair by 7:00 a.m. Daniel's grip tightened. He scrolled to the draft folder on his personal email, found the message to Optimax, still sitting there, unsigned. I never sent it, he muttered. It was a draft. But in the world of digital trails, silence wasn't safety. He looked out again. Tomorrow's board session wasn't just audit review anymore. It was Judgment Day. And the storm wasn't outside anymore. It was coming for him. The boardroom was silent. The kind of silence that wasn't absence of sound, but pressure. Every seat was filled, every screen darkened to avoid distraction. The windows stretched from floor to ceiling, but the blinds had been drawn shut. This was not a meeting for views. It was a hearing. Lila Torres' corporate secretary stood at the entrance with a clipboard checking attendance one by one. Attendance quorum confirmed, she said. Special session notice was issued in accordance with bylaws. All board members present. Outside counsel from Weller and Grant is seated. Conflict disclosures have been signed and logged. Audit chair. Robert Kim nodded. He wore a navy suit and the expression of a man who had testified before Congress. Let's begin, he said. This is a closed special session under audit protocol. No recording permitted. Minutes logged by CorpSec only. He gestured to the screen. Fortis Forensics will walk us through their findings. Then General Counsel Patel will summarize the legal position. CEO Monroe has recused herself from the investigative portion and will remain as a factual resource only. All eyes shifted to the center of the table where Jenna Fortis, lead investigator, stood and connected her secure tablet to the screen. Her voice was calm, clinical. She wasn't here to dramatize, only to prove. 3 key anomalies were detected in the Carelift staging environment, she said. Slide 1, access logs. A temporary service account with elevated privileges was used to access and modify model weights. This account was tied to an executive-level badge with extended admin rights assigned to COO Daniel Cross. Usage logged at 7:16 a.m. the day of the AI demo. Slide 2, security footage. Visual confirmation of Mr. Cross entering the staging room unaccompanied outside of standard review hours. No engineering or compliance personnel present. Slide 3, draft email metadata. A saved, unsent message to a third-party vendor requesting model alignment for aggressive recommendations, citing IPO pressure. Draft timestamp 90 minutes before the override event. Jenna closed her presentation. These findings are based on digital artifacts only. No conclusions beyond the evidence provided. She stepped back. Next, Aisha Patel stood. Override of an ethics gating mechanism, particularly on a consumer-facing AI product, constitutes a governance risk. If left undisclosed, this creates what SEC defines as a material weakness in internal control, especially in the context of an imminent IPO. She looked around the table, calm, measured. There is no evidence CEO Monroe initiated or approved this override. In fact, she paused the rollout when anomalies were flagged consistent with fiduciary duty. Robert Kim nodded. Ms. Monroe, do you have anything to add? As a matter of fact, Clara sat straighter. Yes. She didn't plead. She didn't defend. She simply said I was unaware of any override until the ethics dashboard flagged it. I commissioned Fortis independently and recused myself from investigative decisions. That's all. Robert nodded. Thank you. Then he turned to the door. Let's bring in Mr. Cole. The janitor entered quietly. No title, no badge, no authority. But every pair of eyes followed him as he walked to the front carrying nothing but a whiteboard marker. Robert gestured. "Mr. Cole, you've been asked to provide technical interpretation of the anomalies. Please keep to observable facts. You are not under oath, but your statements are being logged." Evan nodded. He stepped up to the whiteboard and began sketching quickly. A funnel, a decision gate, 2 labeled arrows. "The model receives input here," he said, pointing. "It evaluates based on feature weights. Normally, if risk thresholds are exceeded, it flags for review." He drew a circle. "But if you change the weighting so that on-time bills are overvalued and income loss is undervalued, the model sees desperation as opportunity instead of caution." He added a final loop auto-approval. That's what happened. The override didn't break the system. It bent it just enough to hide predatory outcomes behind statistical noise. One of the directors asked quietly, "Could someone outside the system do this?" Evan shook his head. "Only someone with admin-level access and intent. This wasn't a bug. It was a design decision." He stepped back. "That's all I've got." The room sat in stunned silence. Clara looked down briefly, her hands still. Then she spoke. "I didn't bring Evan Cole here to embarrass anyone," she said. "I brought him because he was the only one willing to name what he saw." She paused. "He didn't hack your systems. He didn't create risk. He saw something that didn't make sense and said so." She looked across the table, eyes steady. "We didn't fail because the model broke. We failed because we ignored the warning signs from someone who wasn't wearing a suit." Robert Kim cleared his throat. "This session has fulfilled its investigative purpose. Based on evidence and legal review, I motion the board to place Mr. Cross on administrative leave pending external investigation. I further recommend that General Counsel retain outside legal oversight and that CISO Armitage isolate the impacted environment immediately." Lila Korpsek raised her hand. "Board resolution requires simple majority." All in favor, hands went up. Miles, Dana, 2 others. Clara abstained. Robert Kim raised his. Motion carries. Daniel Cross said nothing. He stood slowly, straightened his cuffs, walked out. Outside the boardroom, 9:52 a.m., Daniel stood alone by the elevator, fists clenched at his sides. He pulled out his phone and called a familiar number. It rang and rang. Then a voice answered. Cold, measured, priority capital. "It's Daniel," he said. "They just put me on leave." A pause. Then, "We warned you. You overreached." The line went dead. Daniel stared at the black screen. The hallway was quiet. Behind the glass door, the company he'd tried to control was slipping through his fingers. No one really knew what to expect. The invite had gone out 2 days prior town hall. Culture reset announcement. Sunday, 4:00 p.m. Auditorium. Not mandatory. No dress code. No agenda attached. Still nearly every seat was filled. Engineers, legal staff, frontline teams, a few execs, and in the very last row, seated quietly in a blue uniform with frayed cuffs, Evan Cole. Marilyn sat beside him, arms crossed. Maddie was curled up next to her dad legs, swinging gently beneath the fold-down seat, clutching a notebook. No stage lights, no corporate anthem. Just a low platform, 1 microphone, and a woman in black slacks and a dark gray blazer stepping up with quiet resolve. Clara Monroe cleared her throat. "Thank you for coming." She let the silence hold. Not dramatic, just honest. "I'm not here to rehash the headlines," she said. "If you've been here the last few weeks, you felt the shift." Not all of it was visible. Some of it was hidden, and some of it was overlooked by choice. She paced slowly, no cue cards, no teleprompter. When an AI system we built began recommending high-interest credit to vulnerable patients, that wasn't a tech failure. That was an ethical failure. And it didn't start in the code. It was quiet enough to hear someone breathing 2 rows back. It started the moment we stopped listening to the people who actually see. She let that sink in. Then she continued. Today, I want to share what we're doing next. Not to spin, but to rebuild. She raised her hand slightly. First effective immediately, we've launched a whistleblower hotline run entirely by a third party. Anonymous, secure, zero tolerance for retaliation. Period. A nod from Aisha near the front row. Second, we've made our ethics dashboard public internally. Any override of RiskGate's AI flags or recommendation engines will be logged, timestamped, and visible to every manager and above. She looked out at the rows. Transparency isn't just a virtue, it's a system check. She paused. Then, finally, and third, starting next quarter, every employee manager and up will participate in a 60-minute training we're calling. She clicked a slide. The screen behind her lit up. The cleaner's code. A murmur rippled through the room. It's not just a title, she said. It's a mindset. One submitted by a frontline employee who reminded us that integrity doesn't come from roles. It comes from repetition, from paying attention to the smudges, the corners, the things no one else sees. Clara walked slowly across the stage. Her voice softened, not weaker, just closer. This isn't about turning everyone into heroes. It's about equipping people to speak up and reminding leadership to listen down. She looked toward the back. Evan didn't move, but he knew, and so did Maddie. Clara took a breath. Her final words weren't scripted. Years ago, I was a scared kid in a broken home trying to build a science project out of scraps. I almost gave up, but someone who had no title, no agenda, stayed after class and helped me believe again. Her voice didn't shake. It grounded. This week, that same person reminded me why I took this job in the first place. Not for control, but to protect what matters. She never said Evan's name, never pointed, but the room turned anyway. And in the back, Maddie reached over and squeezed her dad's hand. Marilyn smiled through tears. There was no applause, just something better. Stillness, respect. A kind of quiet that only comes when something true has landed. 1 hour later. At Clara's office, her inbox refreshed. A new internal email popped up. Subject: Evan Cole, restored to work. Body please confirm, preferred shift. She clicked reply, but before she could type a ping, came in. New message from Evan Cole. Same shift. Night. It's when things are quietest. That's when the small stuff shows. She smiled, and for the first time in weeks exhaled. The floors gleamed. Not just clean, but cared for. It was 5:42 a.m. The building was mostly asleep save for a few early birds in finance and one security guard nursing his third coffee. Evan Cole moved slowly down the east hallway of Aurelia Dynamics headquarters, pushing his mop bucket past walls that once felt cold and indifferent. Now heads turned as he passed, not in surprise, in respect. One analyst gave a polite nod. A UX designer smiled, said, "Morning, Evan," without hesitating. Even the new HR intern stood from her desk as he passed and said quietly, "Thanks for everything." He didn't need banners, or plaques, or recognition ceremonies. But he noticed the difference. He felt it. And he was still here. 3 weeks ago, the decision came. Daniel Cross had been officially terminated for cause following a unanimous vote by the board based on findings from Fortis and confirmed by outside counsel. The official filing, a Form 8K, was submitted the next morning. The language was precise breach of internal ethics protocols and unauthorized system access material to pre-IPO governance evaluation. There was no press storm, no scandal, just transparency. Aurelia delayed its IPO by 1 quarter, citing operational reassessment and governance upgrades. And Wall Street didn't panic. In fact, investor trust ticked upward. Media outlets highlighted the company's integrity-first handling of internal risk. One op-ed called it a rare example of corporate maturity in a world of executive ego. Clara had said nothing publicly. She didn't need to. She was busy doing the real work, Back in Brooklyn, the apartment felt quieter. The kitchen faucet no longer dripped. It had been replaced the previous week thanks to a small employee wellness voucher slipped into Evan's HR file, quiet recognition the form said. He hadn't asked for it, but when the plumber knocked, he didn't argue. Maddie had danced in circles as the leak finally stopped. "Now the kitchen doesn't sound sad anymore," she said. Evan had laughed, and in the drawer next to the fridge he kept a small envelope. Handwritten, tucked inside a tarnished old screwdriver and a single note on company stationery. "You didn't fix machines. You fixed how we think." C. That Sunday morning, something had changed. The front atrium had changed. New signage, a simple plaque installed near the main elevator. It didn't name names, didn't tell the whole story, but it told enough. Aurelia Dynamics built on integrity. The words were engraved on brushed steel, polished, subtle, but unmissable. Evan paused in front of it, one hand on the handle of his cart. In the glass reflection he saw himself. Not just the uniform, not just the mop, but the man. A man who didn't fight with rage, who never yelled, never demanded, who simply refused to look away when something was wrong, and who taught a company how to see clearly again. "Daddy." Maddie's voice echoed across the lobby. She ran up, coat half-zipped, boots squeaking. Marilyn followed a few steps behind, waving from the door. Evan bent down, opened his arms. Maddie crashed into him like a sunbeam, all warmth and motion. "Can I come upstairs while you finish the last hallway?" He smiled. "Just the quiet part, okay." She nodded solemnly, quiet as a whisper. He stood, one hand still holding hers, and together they walked toward the elevator, past the plaque, past the reflections, past the story everyone now knew in pieces. The floors stayed clean, but more than that, so did the culture. No shortcuts, no unchecked power, just a quiet promise that truth would always have a voice, even if it wore work boots and carried a mop. Fade to black. Sometimes the quietest voices are the ones that change everything. Not through power, not through noise, but through integrity, patience, and the courage to speak when no one else will. If this story touched you, made you think, or reminded you of someone who made a difference in silence, we'd love to hear your story. Have you ever witnessed someone stand up for what's right even when no one noticed? Have you ever been that person? Share it in the comments. Your story might inspire someone else to do the same. And before you go, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We're always amazed by how far these stories travel. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story, because here every story is told with heart. Thank you for spending this time with us. Until next time, stay kind, stay brave, and never stop seeing what others overlook.